Well, this is a very different film. Pete, how in the world did the initial germ of this idea form in your head? Take us back to the very beginning.
Okay, it was 2010, and I was living in Iceland.
Are you kidding?
No.
Wow, okay.
And I had an idea to make a movie that was like a concept album film. So it was going to take an album and use every song in its entirety on that album in the order of the track list as the soundtrack for the film, and then to try to write a story that worked with that album. And so the album I chose was this album by Granddaddy that has a song on it called Everything Beautiful is Far Away. And I started thinking about this guy walking across a desert with a robot head. That evolved. Eventually, I realized this concept album film thing isn't going to work because track 4 is completely wrong for the order of the story, but that's definitely like where the seed first got planted.
Wow. And Saul, how in the world does Pete pitch this idea to you? How do you come on board to the project? You just heard robot head and said, yeah, I got to be a part of this.
Yeah, there was that was basically it. Yeah, it was, you were originally talking about shooting it in Morocco when we first talked about it, and that sounded great. But then we talked about how to shrink it down production-wise and how to make it more streamlined and how to maybe do it in the States for the budget that we wanted to do it at, so we could keep more control creatively. And we went from there. We built it out. I think it was 2013 that we first started talking about it. 14, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Pete, this was not your first time behind the camera. You've got a couple of projects before under your belt, but your background, your deepest part of your background's in editing. Is that, would you say that's true?
I would say the deepest part of my background is playing with G.I. Joes.
Fair enough. I like it. Talk to me about how this film comes from just an idea in your head of a guy carrying a robot head across the desert to actually ending up on the screens before us tonight. What does that process look like?
I mean, that's definitely long, but so this wasn't my first film. It was my first narrative feature film. I've made music videos. I made a feature-length documentary, and I've just been making videos since I was in middle school, so it's just a thing I like to do. And then for the first film, I had the idea in my head as, and I'm not the first to do this, but where I thought about the movie that I was eventually going to make, and thinking about the things that might prevent me from making it. So as writing the script, keeping it simple, fewer characters, fewer locations. So 2 characters, but it could be a little bit more interesting if there was also a robot. And 1 location, but instead of it being somebody's apartment, what if it was the desert? And I didn't want to have to bring out lights, so let's have the character say that he doesn't walk at night. And there are all these things written into the script to make it be able to be made more simply. There are certainly other challenges that arose, but that was sort of the idea behind like why this story first, aside from all like the various personal metaphoric elements to like that narrative. But I had that in mind when writing, to keep it simple and smaller.
Saul, was this the first time you had worked with Pete? Had you worked together on other projects?
It was the first big project that we'd done together, yeah.
And how did that come to be? Did he approach you in a coffee shop? Were you guys friends before? How did this happen?
We were friends before, yeah. We met through some mutual people. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let's get into the film itself, because I'm dying to ask you some questions about the desert and the sand. And a lot of people are going to want to know, where did you shoot this thing? Those locations are incredibly gorgeous. Where was the film shot?
Film was shot in 2 different locations. One desert that did not have a lake, another desert that did. The desert without a lake was called the Imperial Sand Dunes, which are southeast California, almost down to Mexico, past Palm Springs, past the Salton Sea. And it's this really weird, magical 50-mile stretch of the dunes you see, these Sahara-like sand dunes. And then the other location was the Pismo Dunes, which are in Central Coast. When we were trying to figure out where to shoot it, we became very familiar with all the dunes of the world. Looking at lots of pictures and reading and visiting some of them, and these were the ones for sure.
And how did you find the locations? Where, once there's a lot of desert out there, how did you pick these particular locations?
And again, like, we knew this going in, that like any dune will do. So literally every day in the morning, we would get there as the sun was rising, because again, it's all daylight. And we'd go out and so actually what we would do is each day we would move one dune in, because the previous day we would leave all these footprints, and it was really important that it seemed like nobody else was out there. So the next day we'd come to the previous shoot, and you could easily tell, like, okay, we've been here. And then we'd just go over the next dune and then be like, okay, let's do that one.
I know I told you I wouldn't ask you this when we were backstage, but I'm going to ask, what was the film shot on? Because it's so gorgeous. You guys won the Best Cinematography Award at the LA Film Festival. It's such a beautiful film. Some people are certainly going to want to know, what camera was this shot on?
It was shot on an Alexa, thanks to Rick from Panavision Hollywood, who I think is here. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
With Cook Pancrose, had a lot of texture and goodness to them, with a great small camera team.
How big was the crew on this, film? It seems like getting that amount of people and equipment out into the desert. How big a caravan are we talking?
The first part of the shoot was, I think, 22 people total. And then the second part was 14. And the first part we stayed in these two condos. People were sleeping on floors for sure. In a little town called Brawley that smelled like cow poop. and then we got this Airbnb for the second part of the shoot up in Cayucos.
Let's talk about Lerner and Rolla. Sorry. Incredible cast in the film. Were you familiar with their work before? How did you approach them about the project? How did they become involved?
In 2013, Andrea, my co-director, and I were included in Filmmaker Magazine's yearly list called the 25 New Faces of Independent Film. And as we were trying to, and like, this is our first movie, and we're these kids from Ohio, and we don't really know how to make movies or what that even means. We just know how to make videos. And, but you write this script, and you start to imagine who should be in my movie. And it's kind of this weird, really broad question, and you don't know what it means if you start to answer that question, but you're just like, who should be in my movie? And Andrea was looking at the Filmmaker Magazine website at the previous year of 25 New Faces, and Julia was in it. She had been in a movie called Electric Children, and they included her in the list. And Andrea saw a picture of Julia and said, what if she was in our movie? And then we said, yeah, what if she was in our movie? And then we started sending a bunch of emails. We sent emails to these 2 producers that we had shared a condo with at Sundance in 2013, who were friends of friends who we didn't know until we shared a condo with them. And we said, we have the script, and we thought this actress would be great in the movie. Do you know her? and one of them happened to have read lines with her a year previous, and the other said, no, but I'm working with her agent on a different project. And so we said, can you help us do whatever needs to happen to get her to be in our movie? Because again, we don't really know. And then emails were sent, scripts were sent around, and then we met up with Julia at the Jane Hotel in New York. And Andrew and I were sitting there in a booth drinking our cappuccinos, and Julia walks in with her hair, and she walks over and she sits down, and we say, hi. And she says, I would love to do your movie. And we said, okay. And it was that easy. That part of it was that easy. Then we were like, okay, now let's figure out how to make a movie.
Saul, what sort of director is Pete like out there in the desert with these actors? Is he a guy that's running around screaming at everybody? Is he very subdued? What sort of environment did Pete create on set?
Focused and intentional. I think Pete really knew the world that he wanted to create with this movie, and I think the decisions that we made up to being out there were so just pointed us all toward being fully immersed in the environment. So it was really about just having clear intention when we were there, because everything else was set for us. Like he said, there weren't no lights. The location was expansive. It was really, every moment was an opportunity to make the most of it. There was no really waiting for a certain department to be ready or this or that. It was kind of, we're all there, and what are we going to make with this day? And, you know, rolling location scouting the morning of the shoot as well. I mean, all of that is so turning the traditional process on its head in a certain way, but also keeping us kind of beholden to being really deep in it with the actors. I feel like for my observation of your process, Pete, was really, it was wonderful in that it was fully immersed in the realities that were, that world that we were existing in.
Besides your two leads, we also have C.S. Lee, and we have this incredible voice actress providing the voice of Susan. Can you talk a little bit just about how you had envisioned that, and also just the practicality of obviously, the actors probably weren't hearing her voice on set, or maybe they were. How are they respond? Who's voicing Susan on set? How does that all work?
So on set, a lot of the time Saul was Susan. A couple of times I was Susan. A couple of times Andrea was Susan. A lot of times Saul was the one operating the eyes. And then in the edit, I used just like a text-to-speech website where you could just type in the lines and it would give you this robot voice, which was really fun, which I really kind of loved. And then, but we always had it in our head that we would find some person, cast somebody to do it. And the person we ended up finding was Jillian Mayer, who is, she's not an actor per se, she's a filmmaker, an artist herself. She's from Miami. She co-runs a amazing group called the Borscht Corporation, have the Borscht Film Festival. They are like the coolest thing in film right now, basically. And Alan, who did the score, DJ'd at the Borscht Film Festival like last year. And then I saw a film that Jillian made, and I heard her voice, and I thought, she sounds kind of like a robot. And she's got kind of this cool voice. And so I emailed Alan, and I said, Alan, like, what about Jillian? And he's like, wow, that's I love that. And so he connected us. And within like 48 hours, Jillian happened to be in Los Angeles. So she came over to my apartment, and I set up a mic, and we recorded all her lines in like 3 hours. And then, and she was like, I'm a great bot. Like, I can do bot, don't worry. And as we were doing it, I would just be like, a little more bot, a little less bot, just kind of like tweaking the bot dial. And then the other thing that I feel like really makes Susan and like gives it exactly what it needed was I took all the different takes that she did, and I basically reconstructed every line that she says using each word is from a different take. So like, I missed you learn is from take 1, take 3, take 2, and then take 3 again. And it just gives it that little bit of a robotic disconnect. Just something about the inflection is not insanely different. It doesn't sound goofy. It just, something is a little bit like a robot trying to be like a human.
Really interesting. Let's talk about the score for a second, because the music really is powerful in creating the world that you're building there, even from the very get-go. How did you work with your composer? What was sort of the vision for the musical score of the film?
Alan is an old friend of mine. I made a music video for his first band 10 years ago, and have just been friends with him ever since. So he was one of the first people to read the script. And it was always with the intention that he should do the score. So after he even just read the script, he had ideas that he shared right away. Just thinking about that there were these cities out there, and maybe there was like remnants of sounds carried on the wind across the dunes, which were like these very evocative ideas for sounds. Then when it came to the edit, he made a playlist of kind of like reference tracks. And he has an encyclopedic and great taste, knowledge of just old, cool music. And so he had this great playlist that he sent over. And so I used that to edit with. And then I sent him a cut of the movie, and with, like a spreadsheet of here's the 15 cues to make. And basically what's in the movie is just the first stuff he sent back. I don't know if it's because he had also kind of like lived with it long enough that he just was ready to do it, or if he's just that good. But I for sure love the score. I'm really proud of what he did with it, and it's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Saul is the hands behind Susan in at least a fair amount of the film. Can you talk a little bit about how did that work? Were you, did it have a remote control, or what was this a real robot head? Can you tell us a little bit more about Susan?
Just guided her through me. She was controlled with a remote control from, what was it, like a video game or a race car console or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a remote control like you would use on a remote control car.
Yeah. But I mean, I was just connecting with her emotionally, and then
Is that
watching
bullshit?
the actors.
What are you talking about?
Yeah. No, that's true. That's what happened.
I don't know what he was doing, I guess, really, because like we're all looking at it and we forget he's doing it. Really, we're just.
I was imagining. I was looking at the actors who she was looking at, and connecting with her.
I think that's one reason I want to talk about it, is she feels like a really emotional character in the film. And yes, the voice has a lot to do with that, but there's something that becomes very human about Susan over the course of the film.
I definitely remember as we were shooting it that I don't think I ever gave you any like notes on what to do. I really just watched Susan and thought, oh, that's what she did. Huh.
Let's talk a little, but let's unpack.
What were you thinking about? You weren't thinking like I should look up now? You were just like, the cool thing probably that helped it be intuitive was that both eyes were connected to one joystick essentially. So just as it went up or down or over.
There was no risk of cross eyes.
Right, there's no risk of cross-eyed Susan.
Let's unpack are you a robot guy? Did you bring in a consultant to build this? How did Susan come to be who she was on screen?
Am I a robot guy? I'm a robot guy in that I'm into robots. It must be sort of connected that I never went to film school, but my degree in college was in computer science, which was a lot of kind of thinking like a robot. But the practical sense of how do we have this robot head in our movie? We kind of Frankensteined it together. So Andrea and I made it. We found a guy on the internet who's whose name his name is John Square. I don't know if that's real or not, but his name's John Square, and his website is called Robotics Squared. And he has these eyes, these robot eyes, and there's a couple different prototypes. The version we got was the third version where he's been like working on these eyes. And I went to it just the other day, and the website's still exactly the same as it was like 3-4 years ago when we first got the eyes. So we got the eyes, and then we got this mannequin head, but it was white, and that seemed wrong. And like Andrea did all the production design, and the reason it has all the colors it does were all her decisions. So she said this head should be like sand colored, and then she had the idea that what if it was wood? And we had a friend who Andrea went to school with who is an industrial designer who has like a machine shop and was able to mill these like face plates out of wood. So he made the face plates, and then we sourced some like little ear pieces from just like a junkyard, and then just like put it together. And I mean, it was really kind of like that simple. I have messed around with electronics in my life, so wiring her eyes to like batteries and being able to get the remote control to work from like a practical sense was not daunting to me. So we did it. There were like 3 heads. There was one main head, and then we had some backup heads. But the whole movie, really, it's just the one. It's the one hero head.
Well, you directed robots, you directed people in this film. I just have to say, I was tremendously struck by your visual style as a director. It showed a lot of maturity to me, your ability to position the camera in one place and let the environmental storytelling take place. That opening shot is tremendously powerful to me and engaged me from the first moment of the film. What is sort of going on in your mind as you're directing? You've got this huge landscape of desert you're dealing with. You're putting the camera in different places. Can you talk at all about what your thought process is?
It's hard to remember. I feel like probably there was a lot of fear going on of just like, I don't know, being out in that desert was magical, but also insane. Like you're out there in the middle of the nowhere, and it's just like us, and if we don't do it, no one's gonna care. So it's like a lot of pressure that we have on ourselves to keep going and keep getting it. Also, at the same time, you're just kind of dealing with the practical limitations of like what's going on in the moment. So there's a lot of like sort of process of elimination where, okay, we're going the next dune in, and there's only a handful of places, and the Alexa creates a beautiful image, but it's heavy when you have a small camera crew and it has a big tripod, so we're not going to want to go to the top of that dune to shoot the scene. Like, let's shoot it down here. And so like a lot of these decisions you're making just naturally get made. And so you're just always like making and this is probably what all filmmaking is almost anyways, but you're just like making the most of all these situations and trying not to fight what just is in front of you.
This film seems to be hitting a lot of really significant things thematically. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it seems to me there's some pretty powerful statements being made about our relationship to technology. Not asking you to give us the secret, motivation behind the film, but was that on your mind as you were telling this story? Did you have some things to say about our relationship with technology?
I wasn't specifically thinking about our relationship to technology as much as I was just thinking about our relationship to each other. How we connect, how I connect. I mean, I don't think I was thinking about everyone. I was thinking about myself and how I connect with people, how I don't connect with people, what gets in the way of that. is it for better or for worse? And as I made the movie and I have reflected on the movie, I certainly see the similarities that Susan has to a phone. That this thing that we're spending all this time talking with, that makes us think that we're connecting with something, but we're not. We're really not. So I'm totally down with that relevance to our existence now. And without question, there's like the subconsciousness of creativity where whether I'm aware of the decisions being made, like there are decisions being made for me. I'm a person of this time, thinking about the things I'm thinking now because of what I'm experiencing now. So,
there's also a really distinct point of view about the romantic nature of this relationship that unfolds. It's a really sweet, pure, innocent sort of romance that unfolds between the two of these characters, but not one that fits a lot of what we see traditionally in cinematic storytelling. Can you talk a little bit just about that?
Yeah, it was very part of our intention to make a movie that had a platonic relationship between opposite genders, to show that is possible and that it isn't just waiting until they both crawl into the tent together. And so consciously, as I wrote the script, as we cast the actors, there was we had these two possible male actors, and we were showing them both to Julia. Julia had been attached first, and these two attached. It's such a weird movie word. It's nonsense. But we knew we were going to make the movie with Julia first, and we're showing her these two potential actors, and they both had read the script, and we had Skype conversations with them both, and they both seemed like genuine human beings. And we showed them to Julia, and she's like, "Oh, let's pick that one. He's cute." And we're like, definitely the other one. Because we knew we don't want this to be like that kind of romance. We know we want them to eventually become friends, but this isn't about her looking at him dreamy, or him looking at her like, I can't wait for something. There's other things these two people are dealing with. And if they were dealing with, I feel like if they focused on that as like those characters, or characters in a movie, then really they're doing that as a distraction from just dealing with their own personal issues. And I didn't want that either, because that's not like what the conversation I wanted to be having was.
There's a lot of people in the audience who are creators themselves that have projects they're trying to get off the ground. As someone who, you got your film made, you got your story told, what advice can you give to creators who are trying to get their stories told?
It's straddling that line between being realistic and dreaming. Because you got to dream, and you got to go towards things that are like dumb and impossible. But I do think it helped to like try to be realistic about it, to like, I didn't, there's no car crashes, there's no crazy effects in this movie on purpose, because I was trying to like have that balance, because maybe it's different for other people, but I just like making things, and I'm okay with the movie not having like all the stuff that would have made it prohibitive for me to make. So, and it never felt like a compromise. I coined this new phrase, it's a creative non-compromise. Yeah.
I like that.
I was on the festival. It's been playing at other festivals, and I really enjoyed doing Q&As. But you get to talk about it a lot, and it's like 2 Q&As ago came up with the creative non-compromise.
That's good. That is good.
The other thing I would like to just say, because we're at SAG, is like the actors, both Julia and Joe, they really did such a good job. I'm really proud of them in this movie, proud of what they did. I wish I could, I don't wish I could take credit, but I just like can't take much credit for it, aside from maybe trying to say like my script was good for them or something. But really, I didn't have to direct them a lot. I didn't have to tell them what to do. They made all those decisions for the most part themselves. And what was fun was Joe did it kind of method. Was that both had very different approaches. So Joe was very method. He didn't eat meat or dairy during the shoot because I guess he only wanted to eat protein-rich roots. But everything in his backpack is what Lerner carries. He could have just had a pillow in there, but he's like, no, put it all in there. I want to be carrying that heavy backpack. He would walk. We would all drive on these ATVs to get to where we were going to shoot, and he would walk because he's just like, no, I want to be in the character. And then Julia was, just like take after take, he was really kind of like, and it just works so well for the characters, but he was really methodical. He was really consistent with what it was going to be. And then with Julia, you just had to let her go. And that worked too, it's just like another way to do it. And what was really fun, it was sort of strange during the shoot because you're like watching it happening, like, are we getting it? Is it good? Like, is it working? Are they connecting or whatever? And you're doing all these takes and you're like, I guess we got it. And then in the edit, getting to spend so much more time with each of them and all their choices within their performances, and just really getting to appreciate like what they did as actors, and how much most of the time all I ever did was get in their way by interjecting anything,
Saul, what was the biggest lesson you learned in the process of making this film as a producer?
I mean, I think I can say probably this is the only time I'll ever make a film with 20 people 50 miles out in the middle of the desert, with just a couple $100,000 over, I mean, we shot this film at the beginning of 2015, so it's been a minute, and I think the biggest thing for me is how to stay true to the creative of what it is we set out there to do, even in the face of, feeling our environment and our methods and our processes, maybe shifting things and having to course correct. Doing that with a small team of people who are really dedicated to the creative was a gift to me, and that will stay with me always for sure. Yeah.
Pete, if we want to support this film somehow, how can we support the film? What does sort of the future of the film look like?
How do you support a film you like? How do you support a film you like?
Give random cash gifts to the director?
No, I mean, how do you support a film you like? I mean, presumably you talk about it. Presumably you post about it on social media, but like, what is that really? If you want to see it again and you're okay with watching it on your computer, in December, you'll be able to buy it on iTunes. That's one way. I think the other way to support a film you like I said, is talking about it. I think a way I would like for you to support the film is by being a good person.
What a beautiful answer. I love that. Love that. Would you join me in thanking the filmmakers for being here tonight?
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming out. Have a great evening.